David Crosier.
Hello, Mr. Crosier. So you are an analyst for the Eurydice Network and a co-chair of the working group on monitoring. So I was thinking if you could explain to us the stock-taking process within the Bologna process and why is it so important?
Yeah, sure. So I'll try to put it in a nutshell. As you know, the Bologna process has been going for nearly 25 years. And in the early years, there were some commitments made by countries to move towards the harmonization of their systems to make it easier for mobility in particular. But after a few years, it became necessary to see how countries were doing in meeting their commitments. So where there was movement, where there was not, to identify what issues needed to be addressed. And that was the start of the monitoring, if you like. And in the early years, it was introduced with countries just reporting themselves what they'd done. And this was okay for the first decade of the process, but after a while, it becomes necessary to actually look perhaps a bit more objectively with using different sources of information. And that's when Eurydice, where I work, became involved, because as an organization, our experience is in collecting policy data from countries and comparing it, so looking at comparative analysis of policies in different areas. And we were brought into the role of monitoring in terms of the European higher education area commitments as the kind of commitments increased. And so we started to do it by collecting the information from countries, from the BFUG members, but also looking at what other information was available from different sources and comparing it. So and trying to organize it as clearly and simply as possible, but really checking the information. So when we collect information from a government, if they just say, yes, we do this, that's not enough for us. We need to have evidence that they do it in terms of a policy document, legislation that's been changed. So we check all of the sources for the information. So that's the way we work.
So you go to every source, that's how you collect data, so you compare everything, what they say with what we have on paper?
Exactly. So we compare what they say. We ask the questions, have you done this? And if they say they've done it, we say, how can you show us that you've done it? So it's where is it? It's in your legislation. You've changed the legislation, or you've introduced a policy that's implemented at national level. So we look for the underlying source that shows that it's not just, yes, we're saying we've done something, but we're actually looking for the source that proves it.
And how do you ensure the accuracy and the reliability of the data during the monitoring process? Do you have any means to do that?
Well, we check the references which are provided. So in other words, if a law has been adopted, we look inside the law and see what it says. Nowadays, actually, it's easier because you can, even with laws and policy documents in different languages, you can check more easily the translation, although we have a multilingual team anyway that works on this. So yeah, we check the source information. That's but of course we also work on the basis of trust as partners. So it's not that we don't believe what people are telling us. I think they try to give us correct information, but still we check it and verify the information.
Yeah, it wouldn't make any sense for somebody to lie since they are willing to be part of this process.
And it will be published.
Right.
So it's published information. So if it's incorrect, it will be challenged quite quickly.
Right. Do you think there are any particular areas or aspects of the implementation that needs a bit more focus on, a bit more attention?
Well, I think what happens is that sometimes when you implement something, it might not be done exactly in the same way in every country, because all the systems are very different, the cultures, the practices are different, and when you think you've done something in a way that sort of makes it easier to kind of work together with other countries, you actually have to look if that's really the case, so whether what you've done really facilitates in reality the movement of students, or the recognition of their qualifications, is this really working in practice? So it's indeed it's important to really look in more depth than just the superficial questions to understand the nature of how things are done. But on some policy areas, it's about kind of checking in depth. In some policy areas, it's about understanding how different systems might actually have different approaches to reach the same objective. So that's also important to understand, in a complex European tapestry.
How did the monitoring process change in the last 20 years, and how do you expect it to change, to evolve in the future?
Well, I think the main thing that's happened is that the number of policy commitments has increased. So the problem that we have for monitoring is that the policy agenda expands, but the resources to do the monitoring do not. So and this is also a problem for the countries that are reporting information to us. That
resources?
Yeah, because I mean, we ask people in the ministry to give, as I said, information which is not just yes, no, but yes, where do you find this in your legislation or policy documents, and it can be across many different policy areas. So it's quite heavy work for the countries, time-consuming for them. And we have to check it all, and we're just a small team. So so the problem is that you can't just keep expanding the policy agenda but have the same model of monitoring. So your question about the future is one that we're also asking ourselves, how to think about this in the future. And what we think is that there are some areas of kind of development in the European higher education area which we don't really know how to monitor yet. So, for example, there's a lot of discussion about the importance of fundamental values, of academic freedom, institutional autonomy, these kind of things, and it's but how do we know that there's real respect for those values, and what kind of information do we need to monitor the exercise of these values? And that can't simply come from governments. Of course, every government, if you ask them, do you ensure that academic freedom is respected, will say yes. But we know in reality, unfortunately, that there are sometimes cases where it's not the case. But how do we get a kind of reliable system in place to pick up these kind of problems with respect for values, or the tensions between them? And that's something which, there's work going on within the process to explore, but where we're not there yet on having the solution. And so, but what we would think is that we might need to be more focused and more limited in scope about what we monitor in the future, in order to establish a system, and then at a future point you might be able to kind of collect information more systematically once you know how to do it. So we might have, for example, a combination of more focused thematic monitoring in one period and more comprehensive monitoring of some longer-term commitments in another period. So we would have a model where we're not trying to look at monitoring everything all the time. So it's more differentiated. So I think that's the way it's going to move. I think that we try to understand things in depth, but in order to do that, we maybe need more focus. and that means sacrificing the kind of comprehensive monitoring approach at times and looking more kind of at a variety of ways of monitoring and doing different things at different times.
Thank you very much for your time with us today.
Thank you.